The jungle was alive. Not just with the chirps and clicks of unseen creatures, but with a palpable energy, a heavy, humid breath that clung to everything. Today is July 14th, 2025. Massive trees older than any nation formed a dense canopy that blotted out the sun, casting the forest floor in a perpetual twilight. Thick vines like green serpents coiled around ancient trunks, and ferns unfurled in intricate patterns across the damp earth. The air was thick with the scent of wet soil, decaying leaves and the sweet perfume of exotic flowers that bloomed in vibrant, defiant bursts of color amidst the overwhelming green. It was a world of primal beauty and unforgiving danger, where every shadow could hide a predator and every sound could be a final warning. On the very edge of this untamed wilderness, a small village huddled as if seeking shelter from the vastness surrounding it. The buildings were rudimentary, constructed from wood and corrugated iron, their roofs stained with rust and moss. Laundry lines heavy with damp clothes were strung between makeshift poles. The paths were mud, churned by the passage of heavy-tired vehicles and the boots of grim-faced men. This wasn't a peaceful hamlet, it was a den, a hidden outpost for a notorious cartel. The atmosphere was tense, the silence punctuated by the distant hum of a generator and the occasional harsh laughter of guards who patrolled the perimeter with rifles held loosely, but always ready. The village seemed to fester in the jungle's embrace, a scar of human corruption on a pristine landscape. Armed men stood at every corner, their eyes scanning the tree line with a mixture of boredom and paranoia. They were the wolves guarding the wolf's lair, confident in their numbers and their isolation. They believed themselves untouchable, hidden away in a corner of the world that the law had forgotten. The heat was oppressive, making the air shimmer above the metal roofs and adding to the sense of lethargy that hung over the compound. Yet this lethargy was a fragile thing, a thin veneer over a core of brutal violence ready to erupt at the slightest provocation. From a high ridge overlooking this scene, the jungle watched. It was an impartial observer, ancient and patient. It had seen empires rise and fall, and this small collection of dangerous men was but a fleeting irritation. The wind whispered through the leaves, carrying secrets and premonitions. The sounds of the village, the clatter of a dropped pan, a shouted command, the growl of an engine, were swallowed by the immense indifferent symphony of the wilderness. The stage was set, the actors were in place. The air grew still, heavy with the anticipation of a storm that was about to break. A storm not of rain and wind, but of something far more precise and deadly. Perched motionless on a thick branch high in a kapok tree, the figure was almost invisible. It blended with the dappled light and shadow, a thing of bone and darkness. This was Unit Zero. It wasn't a man, not anymore. It was a weapon, sculpted into a skeletal form, its frame a lattice of advanced polymers and synthetic bone. There was no skin, no muscle, just the stark, terrifying architecture of a skeleton given purpose and deadly function. Its movements were fluid and silent, devoid of any wasted motion. Its head, a polished skull with optic sensors glowing a faint cold blue in their sockets, swiveled slowly, scanning the village below with inhuman precision. Zero's right arm was no longer an arm. It had reshaped itself, nanobots flowing and reconfiguring with silent efficiency. In its place was a long-barreled sniper rifle, seamlessly integrated into its shoulder joint. The weapon was as much a part of its body as its spine or its ribs. It was a perfect tool for a perfect killer. Zero did not feel the humidity. It did not notice the insects that crawled over its metallic bones. It felt nothing but the mission parameters humming in its core programming. The target was Hector El Martillo Vargas, the cartel leader. He was scheduled for a meeting in the main building. Elimination was the only objective. A tinny voice crackled to life, transmitted directly into Zero's auditory sensors. Control to Zero. Target is on the move. Confirm visual. The voice was sterile, detached. It was the only voice Zero ever heard. It was its creator, its commander, its god. Zero's optic sensors zoomed in, focusing on a stout, bearded man stepping out of a reinforced truck. The man was laughing, clapping one of his lieutenants on the back. Facial recognition software cross-referenced the image in a nanosecond. Target confirmed, Hector Vargas. The confirmation was not spoken but processed, a simple data point in a complex equation of death. Zero remained utterly still. Patience was a part of its programming. Its targeting reticle settled on Vargas's temple, a small, glowing red circle that promised oblivion. It tracked the target's every movement, compensating for wind speed, humidity, and the subtle sway of the branch it rested upon. It was a machine of absolute focus. The world narrowed to that single point of contact. The jungle, the village, the guards, they were all just background noise. There was only the mission. There was only the target. And there was the silent, waiting promise of the shot. The trigger was a thought, a command sent from its processor to its weapon limb. It was waiting for the perfect moment. Just as Zero's internal chronometer marked the optimal moment to fire, the air itself began to tear. It started as a shimmer, a heat haze where there was no heat. Then, the space in the center of the village square began to twist and contort. The light bent around it, creating a vortex of fractured colors. The cartel guards stopped, their lazy conversations dying in their throats. They stared, rifles half raised, at the impossible phenomenon unfolding before them. The humming generator sputtered as if drained of its power. The very fabric of reality seemed to groan under an immense strain, right in the heart of their fortified compound. The air ripped open with a sound like tearing silk, amplified 1,000 times. A swirling portal, a maelstrom of violet and black energy, stabilized in the clearing. It was a wound in the world, and from its depths, something was emerging. The guards took a hesitant step back, their paranoia now fully ignited. This was not something they were trained for. This was not a rival cartel or a government raid. This was something else entirely, something alien and terrifying. The portal pulsed with an otherworldly light, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like specters across the dusty ground. A figure stepped through. He was immense, a monolith of muscle and bronze skin. He wore the armor of an ancient gladiator, a leather terrages skirt, a single pauldron on his left shoulder, and greaves that shone with a dull luster. In one hand, he gripped a massive, double-headed axe, its edges looking sharp enough to split atoms. In the other, he held a tower shield, scarred and dented from 1,000 battles in 1,000 other worlds. This was Obelisk. His face was a mask of stern pride, his eyes sweeping across the strange new environment with a conqueror's gaze. He planted his feet firmly on the ground, and the portal snapped shut behind him with a final, thunderous clap. Obelisk took a deep breath, his chest swelling. "What desolate realm is this?" he boomed, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that seemed to shake the very foundations of the village. He looked at the gawking, gun-toting men with disdain. Are these the champions of this world? Frail things of soft flesh and loud sticks. He dismissed them with a wave of his axe, his attention drawn not to them, but to a feeling, a sense of power, a presence. His gaze lifted, scanning the jungle canopy, drawn by an instinct honed in countless arenas. He was searching for a worthy opponent, and he could feel one watching him. High above, Zero processed the new variable. The unidentified entity was a non-mission critical anomaly. The primary objective remained. Hector Vargas, momentarily forgotten by his own men, was still in the open, paralyzed by the spectacle. Zero's programming was rigid. Anomaly or not, the window of opportunity was closing. The command was sent. The thought became action. There was no bang, only a high-frequency thump as the kinetic kill vehicle projectile was launched. The air split with a near-silent hiss. Before the sound of the portal's closure had fully faded, a fine red mist erupted from Hector Vargas's head. He crumpled to the ground, a puppet with its strings cut. The assassination was perfect. It was clean. It was unnoticed by all but one. Obelisk's head snapped towards the tree line, his eyes locking onto the exact point from which the silent death had come. He had felt it. A flicker of immense energy, a whisper of lethal intent. The cartel guards, shocked out of their stupor by the sudden death of their leader, finally reacted. One of them screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Vargas's body. Another started firing his rifle wildly into the air. Chaos erupted. Alarms began to blare, their shrill cry tearing through the jungle's peace. Men scrambled for cover, shouting and pointing in every direction. A coward's weapon, Obelisk snarled, his voice cutting through the rising panic. He had no interest in the scurrying minions. His focus was entirely on the hidden killer. "Show yourself, assassin. Face me in honorable combat if you dare." He slammed the butt of his axe on the ground, the impact creating a small crater and sending a tremor through the earth. He was a warrior, a gladiator. He lived for the challenge, for the glory of battle against a worthy foe. A kill from the shadows was an insult to his very being. He wanted blood and thunder, not this skulking dishonor. Zero, its mission complete, began to retract its weapon arm. The rifle flowed back into the shape of a skeletal hand. Its new directive was simple, egress, avoid engagement. But it was too late. With a roar of pure frustration and challenge, Obelisk moved. He wasn't running, he was charging. Each stride was a seismic event, covering meters of ground with impossible speed. He launched himself towards the kapok tree, his powerful legs propelling him upwards in a gravity-defying leap. He was a missile of bronze and rage, aimed directly at Zero's perch. The silent predator was about to be forced into a very, very loud fight. Obelisk crashed into the canopy like a meteor. Branches exploded into splinters, and leaves rained down as he landed on the thick limb where I had been just a moment before. The gladiator's sheer mass made the ancient tree groan in protest, but I was already in motion. I dropped from the branch, my skeletal frame plummeting towards the ground. I landed with a soft, metallic crunch, my joints absorbing the impact without a hint of strain. Before Obelisk could reorient himself, I was already sprinting towards the dense jungle, a blur of white bone against the green foliage. Evasion was the priority. "You will not flee!" Obelisk roared, leaping from the tree and landing with a ground-shaking thud that sent dirt and roots flying. He was faster than anything his size had a right to be. He charged after me, his massive axe held ready. He swung it in a wide horizontal arc, aiming to cleave me in two. The axe head, bigger than a man's torso, whistled through the air, shearing through thick tree trunks as if they were saplings. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the jungle like cannon fire as a path of destruction opened behind the charging gladiator. I didn't look back, I couldn't be surprised. My sensors tracked Obelisk's every move. As the axe swung, I slid, my metallic feet digging into the mud. The blade passed inches over my skull with a rush of displaced air. In the same fluid motion, my left arm morphed. The bones of my forearm extended and sharpened, twisting into a long, serrated blade. I spun, using the momentum of my slide, and lashed out, aiming for Obelisk's exposed leg. The blade, a monomolecular edge of humming nanites, struck the gladiator's shin with incredible force. The impact produced a shower of sparks and a deafening shriek of stressed metal on something harder. The blade, capable of slicing through tank armor, didn't even leave a scratch on Obelisk's skin. It was like striking a mountain with a razor blade. The feedback jolted my entire frame. Obelisk merely grunted, more annoyed than hurt. He brought his heavy boot down, aiming to stomp me into the mud. I recoiled instantly, my nanites already repairing the micro-fractures in my arm blade from the impact. The fight had just begun, and the rules of engagement had been irrevocably rewritten. The voice of control crackled in Zero's head. "Engage and neutralize hostile entity. It is compromising your egress. New objective, survive." The directive was simple, but the execution was proving complex. Zero's blade had failed. Its primary offensive tactic against armored targets was ineffective. It needed to adapt. As Obelisk's foot descended, Zero's body contorted, twisting away. At the same time, its arm morphed again, the blade retracting and reforming into a heavy, piston-like hammer. It swung the hammer fist into Obelisk's ankle, aiming for the joint. The blow landed with a dull, metallic clang. Obelisk stumbled, not from pain but from the unexpected force disrupting his balance. His skin was unbreakable, but his joints were not immune to kinetic shock. He growled in frustration, swinging his tower shield around to swat Zero like a fly. The massive shield blotted out the light as it descended. Zero was too close to dodge. It raised both arms, its hands reshaping into a smaller, reinforced buckler. The impact was cataclysmic. Zero was thrown backwards, skidding 20 feet through mud and undergrowth, its skeletal body groaning under the strain. Nanobots swarmed over its frame, instantly repairing cracked ribs and reinforcing stressed joints. "You are resilient, bone thing," Obelisk admitted, a hint of respect in his tone. He advanced slowly, a walking fortress of might, but resilience is not victory. He threw his axe. It spun end over end, a whirlwind of destruction that sliced the air. Zero, still recovering, had no time to form a complex weapon. It simply dove to the side. The axe embedded itself deep into a colossal jungle tree, the trunk shuddering as if struck by lightning. This gave Zero an opening. It charged forward, under Obelisk's guard, its hands now sharpened into wicked claws. It raked them across the gladiator's chest. Again the sound of screeching metal filled the air. Sparks flew, but the claws slid harmlessly off Obelisk's invulnerable skin. It was like trying to scratch diamond with chalk. Zero felt the futility. Its programming raced through tactical options, finding few that applied. This opponent negated its core strengths. Obelisk, momentarily weaponless, simply backhanded Zero with his shield arm. The blow caught Zero square in the chest, shattering its sternum and sending it flying into the very tree that now held his axe. Zero's blue optic lights flickered for a moment as its systems fought to reboot and repair the catastrophic damage. The jungle clearing had become a war zone. The sounds of the titanic struggle between Zero and Obelisk had drawn the now panicked cartel guards like moths to a destructive flame. They emerged from their cover, their faces a mixture of terror and misplaced bravado. Seeing the giant gladiator locked in combat with the skeletal assassin that had killed their boss, they did the only thing they knew how to do: they opened fire. A hail of bullets from a dozen assault rifles converged on the clearing, indiscriminately targeting both combatants. The air filled with the angry buzz of lead. The bullets were an annoyance, nothing more. They ricocheted off Obelisk's skin with metallic pings like pebbles thrown against a battleship. He didn't even flinch, his focus entirely on the crumpled form of Zero. A few stray rounds struck Zero's frame, some passing harmlessly through the gaps in its bones, others chipping small fragments from its synthetic structure. The damage was negligible and the nanites were already patching the holes. But the gunfire was a new tactical element. The guards, emboldened by their seeming lack of effect, advanced into the clearing. "Insects!" Obelisk bellowed, finally turning his attention to the guards. He was insulted by their interference. He strode over to the tree, grabbing the handle of his axe. With a grunt of effort, he ripped it free, tearing a huge chunk of wood with it. He turned, his face a mask of cold fury. "You dare interrupt a glorious duel?" He swung the axe, not with the blade but with the flat of it. The weapon moved in a blur, catching 3 guards in the chest and sending them flying into the jungle like broken dolls. The others froze, their courage evaporating in an instant. Zero used the distraction. Its systems were back online, its shattered sternum already knitting itself back together. The directive remained, egress. It scrambled to its feet and sprinted away from the chaos, deeper into the jungle. It moved with renewed speed, weaving through the trees, leaving the enraged gladiator and the terrified guards behind. The sounds of panic, of Obelisk's furious roars, and the splintering of wood and bone began to fade as Zero put distance between itself and the clearing. The village was in flames now, a stray bullet having ignited a fuel drum. The mission was complete, but the escape was a chaotic failure. Zero ran. It didn't tire, it didn't breathe, it simply moved, a silent wraith fleeing through the emerald labyrinth. Its internal GPS mapped a course towards a prearranged extraction point, a narrow rope bridge spanning a deep, mist-filled chasm. It was a perilous crossing, chosen specifically because it would deter pursuit by conventional vehicles or forces. Zero's sensors, however, picked up a rapidly approaching signal. Heavy rhythmic impacts that shook the ground. Obelisk was not a conventional force. He was still in pursuit, and he was closing the distance with terrifying speed. The bridge came into view. It was a rickety-looking affair, old ropes and weathered wooden planks swaying gently in the breeze that rose from the canyon below. Zero didn't hesitate. It stepped onto the bridge, its weight barely causing it to stir. It moved with a balanced, steady pace across the swaying structure. The mist below was thick, concealing the bottom of the chasm, a white sea of nothingness. Halfway across, the ground on the other side of the canyon erupted. Obelisk burst through the tree line, his eyes burning with furious light as he saw his quarry escaping. "You will not escape your judgment, creature," he roared. He would not be able to cross the flimsy bridge. His weight would tear it from its moorings in an instant, but he had other options. He braced himself, planting his feet wide. He gripped his massive tower shield with both hands, his muscles bunched, veins like thick cables standing out on his arms and neck. With a primal scream of effort that echoed across the canyon, he hurled the shield. It flew like a discus, a spinning disc of unstoppable force, aimed not at Zero, but at the bridge itself. The shield struck the rope anchors on Zero's side of the chasm with the force of a wrecking ball. The thick ropes, as thick as a man's arm, snapped with a sound like gunshots. The bridge, its support severed, dropped away. For a moment, Zero was suspended in mid-air, its feet on planks that were no longer connected to anything. Then, gravity asserted its dominance. Zero, along with the wreckage of the bridge, plunged into the white misty abyss. Its blue optic lights stared upwards as it fell, a silent witness to its own destruction. Obelisk stood at the edge, breathing heavily, watching his foe disappear into the clouds. Obelisk stood at the canyon's edge, his chest heaving. He had won. The strange skeletal warrior was defeated, shattered on the unseen rocks below. He retrieved his shield, which had clattered to the ground near the edge. A sense of victory washed over him, but it was hollow. It was an unsatisfying end. The creature had been fast, resilient, and had fought with a strange, cold logic. It had not screamed, it had not begged, it had not even bled. It was a worthy opponent, and its demise in a chasm felt like a cheat. He had wanted to break it with his own hands. He turned his gaze back towards the burning village. The sounds of chaos had died down. The surviving guards had likely fled into the jungle, their organization shattered with the death of their leader. This world was strange. It was filled with frail, loud creatures, yet it had produced a warrior like the Bone Thing. What other wonders, what other challenges did it hold? He felt a stir of curiosity, of anticipation. Perhaps this forced journey to a new realm was not a punishment, but an opportunity, a new arena, with new champions to defeat. Deep below, in the swirling mists of the chasm, something was happening. Where Zero's body had fallen, a cloud of microscopic machines, no larger than dust motes, was beginning to reassemble. The nanobots, following their core programming, began to seek each other out. Guided by a central command unit that had protected itself during the fall, they swirled and coalesced. First, they formed a single, dense sphere of metallic liquid. Then, slowly, painstakingly, the sphere began to extrude shapes. A spine, a ribcage, a limb. The process was silent, methodical, and utterly relentless. Zero was rebuilding itself from scratch. On the canyon floor, amidst the wreckage of the bridge, a skeletal figure rose. Its optic lights flickered back to life, glowing with the same cold blue light. It ran a diagnostic. All systems were operational. The nanite colony was at 98% efficiency. It looked up at the distant cliff edge where Obelisk stood, a tiny figure against the sky. Zero processed the data. The hostile entity was still present, but the mission directive was egress. Without a sound, Zero turned and melted into the shadows of the canyon, leaving its would-be vanquisher alone, staring into an empty abyss filled with a newfound and unsettling curiosity.